Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broke In. I'm your host, Jamie Lima, and founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions, where we help people prepare for, navigate, and recover financially from divorce. This podcast is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. In today's episode of Broke Up, Not Broken, we're delighted to welcome Kelly J. Todd, president and forensic investigator at Forensic Strategic Solutions. With a profound passion for unveiling the truth behind complex financial data, Kelly has a storied career in forensic accounting, teaching, and serving as an expert witness in courtrooms. Her work not only involves intricate financial investigations, but also extends to educating others through her contributions to the Forensic Strategic Solutions blog, where she shares insights into the latest trends and techniques in forensic accounting. This conversation has been one I've been looking forward to for so very long. It is so great to have you here with us, Kelly. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Well, I am, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. So, looking forward to getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is forensic accounting, the forensic financials thing is something that comes up in pretty much every case that we work at Allegiant Divorce Solutions for a variety of reasons, all of which would be like 5 podcasts on all the different concepts and cases that we've seen over the years doing this work. But one of the things that I've found is that, folks like you don't necessarily need to wait to bring in a financial accountant effectively to the mix if you're contemplating divorce, right? So there's a benefit of using you leading up to the divorce and preparing for it, but there's also a significant benefit of using someone like yourself while you're going through a divorce, right? And so maybe talk a little bit more about that, like kind of that beginning stages, because a lot of the people that we work with haven't even thought about hiring someone like you, and now they're in the throes of a divorce.
Well, the thing is, I think, just kind of on the front end, stop and think about it. Wherever there's money at stake, there is likely to be some kind of risk of deception, right? And most people don't think like that, at least in my experience. And when you're talking about divorce, there are a lot of bad things that are happening. They're, emotional, you name it. And again, when there's something at stake, the possibility of that deception occurring or the exploitation of one of the partners from a financial perspective is great. At least in my experience, I find, and I know in my own marriage, one of us is financially savvy and it knows what's going on, and one of us does not. And it's not because I'm hiding something from my husband, but it just, kind of happened that way. But over the course of my career, and like you mentioned, my career has been focused on what happens after. Or what happens, you're in the throes of a divorce. I'm the person that you call when when somebody needs to follow the money, when we're looking for hidden assets, when it comes time to put the bad guy away. Now that's a little bit different side of my business. That doesn't necessarily happen in divorce, but a lot of the work that I do, does get to that point. But I find myself at this point in my career now where I can take my experiences and help raise awareness for others that are in the throes of some kind of major financial event, and help raise awareness to empower somebody with tools to help prevent that kind of exploitation or that financial betrayal before it actually happens. So I'm fortunate now to be able to go out and spread the word, essentially.
What are some of those tools?
Well, I would say the very first thing, just from a awareness perspective, is going back to there's usually one spouse who knows what's going on and one who doesn't. The very first tool is to be aware, is to make it your business to know what's happening from a financial perspective in your marriage. Now, that doesn't mean that you know every single in and out, but, and also it can be sometimes that's something that's easier said than done, but to just make yourself aware, because the types of things that we start seeing are hidden assets, or, money going into, one very common way of hiding now, or has become far more popular, is cryptocurrency. watching where your money is going and being aware of accounts. And even if it's as simple as listening to conversations that your spouse has about money with others, if you're out to dinner or a business dinner or something of that nature. But it is truly about just being aware of what's happening and, like I said, make it your business.
Yeah. And that goes for even people that are not going through a divorce, right? I mean, it's
absolutely.
I've been a financial planner for almost 20 years now. And even in the traditional financial planning engagements that we have, where we're just working with, families to help them figure out things like college planning and retirement planning and insurance needs and things like that, there tends to only be one spouse that is truly, the point person. Right. That doesn't have to always be male, the male in the relationship, but in many cases, it is the female, the wife in cases. And I've been telling people for years and years and years, if you're the point person, you owe it to your family to bring them in on these conversations, because it's not, there may be a time when maybe it's not due to divorce, but it's due to death. Mm-hmm. And you have to be involved in those conversations, and you're left to pick up but you're not. And then you're left to pick up the pieces when all is said and done. So, for those that are listening out there that are maybe it's not necessarily divorce that you're concerned about, but also traditional finances, you have to be involved, mm-hmm. And I think it's like you said, it's just, being aware, asking some questions, understanding if heaven forbid something were to happen, where do you go? Who do you talk to? Where is all the information? And I think that's a solid first step. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And something as simple as just having a conversation on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, accounts that you've got, where the money is being spent, that sort of thing, investments. And as you said, it's not just about divorce, because it's also any kind of family situation, death, you name it. Putting those pieces of the puzzle together can be very difficult if you are starting at zero.
Yeah. One of the things that I've found in almost every case that we work on, we start off with about 60% of the information we need. And usually it's the information that we have from our side of the case, right? Like the other side isn't forthcoming. They're not transparent. They've tried to hide money, so they don't want to share the information. They don't want to, even things like tax returns there, it's very difficult to get access to. So let's still sticking with the, maybe leading up to the divorce and maybe in the beginning stages of the divorce, what are the most important things that you would say you need to start thinking about gathering if you think there is some kind of financial funkiness involved?
Yeah. Bank statements, investment statements, tax returns, anything of that nature. And, when you start having difficulty, or if you see that there are missing statements, that can be an indication that something might be amiss. But also, just from I guess this goes more into digging into the records as opposed to just what you're gathering, but, pay attention to transactions. Are there transactions that are occurring that look unusual, or money being moved to an account you've never seen before? I tell people so often, don't just gather those bank statements, look at them. What kind of things, what kind of transactions are you seeing in there? Can be very helpful.
Can you walk us through what the process is? Let's say somebody thinks that there's something going on, and we hire you and you're working on, with one of our clients. What is that experience like? Is there a lot of data gathering, or is it a matter of let's just start? Do you start from the what is everybody that I've worked with has a different process, or seems to follow a little bit of different process? But what's your process?
Well, one of the first things is we would want to gain a little bit of information. What's happening? What have you seen? What do you suspect? And yes, then it's gathering the information and putting the pieces of the puzzle together. We build a database of transactions. And, but let me back up just a second too. I mean, generally we get hired by the attorney, one of the attorneys. And then just from the perspective of gathering the documents, we don't necessarily ask for the kitchen sink, but let's find a good starting place, because as you know, this type of thing, this type of analysis doesn't come cheap. And so we don't want to run down a bunch of rabbit holes and that sort of thing. So we need to have an understanding of the core, an understanding of transactions or things perhaps that you have that the spouse has seen or heard, that sort of thing. And then we just start following the money from there. And, I can give you plenty of scenarios to where they thought there were only 3 accounts and we end up coming back with, 30 extra accounts. Like, well, what about this one? And what about this one? And, that type of thing. So
I can see that happening all the time, because even when we get into the statements, you can start to see money shifting around, or the tax returns is a really good place to look at. Maybe there's a distribution, and now it's like, okay, well, where did that money go? Because we're not seeing it on any of the bank statements, so on and so forth. So, but one of the things that has been a challenge for me personally. So I'm going to ask this question selfishly. So sorry, listeners, this is all about me in this moment, is dealing with the attorneys. The attorneys, I've found, tend to feel like they've got it all handled. And what I've seen in a lot of cases is they're like, well, like they don't really want to work with us, or they're kind of lukewarm to the idea. It's about 50-50. You have about half of them that think that, because they don't want to give up the billable hours. Mm-hmm. They want to keep all the money to themselves. And they feel like if they can handle it themselves, then they're going to be the hero in the end. And in many cases, they just start spinning their wheels because they don't understand the financials like, folks like we do. What has been your experience, and kind of like, what would you tell the audience if that's, some of the feedback or the pushback that you're getting from the attorney?
I've seen it all over the board. A lot of times how we end up in a divorce situation is because there's really 2 sides of my practice. And one is the investigation side, which is my expertise. And then my partner's side of the practice is business valuation. So those divorces where there are privately held businesses that need to be valued to determine, the equitable distribution. So often, our divorce work starts from that place, from the business valuation place. And then there may be suspicions that something may be going on. For example, unreported income, or, we oftentimes see some premeditated, we affectionately call it premeditated pre-divorce economic downturn syndrome, where, the economy is going great, but all of a sudden this business right before divorce happens suddenly has this, downward spiral. But that's a lot where we get brought in. And in those particular cases, and a lot of the work that we do is in high net worth divorce, where it's very complicated financial situation, we tend to see attorneys who are more than willing to hire us for the help for the business valuation aspect. But we have run into those folks who either have, an accountant on staff and they want to try to follow the money, or, make the determination of, as far as alimony goes, and doing that kind of lifestyle analysis sort of a thing. But when it gets complicated is when they typically call us in. And they tend not at that point to want to hoard the work. But, and I've seen it though from the other perspective, where I've had folks call me directly, not non-attorneys, the person, going through the divorce, call and say, I know this is happening, and they're very emotional. I mean, you know this, and emotional, and we will typically say to them, because we can't get access on our own, we don't have subpoena power, we're reliant upon the attorneys to get us access to a lot of the information, because especially in that kind of situation, it is more likely than not going to be the other spouse that's got the access to the information. So that's why I say that we're typically brought in by the attorneys. But where I was going with that was that when I have been, or when we have been contacted directly by the divorcing spouse, we'll say, go talk to your attorney, share this information. We always recommend, if you suspect that there's funny business going on, document it, because documenting it not only helps you think about it a little more clearly, and it might jog your memory and that sort of thing. It also helps communicate to the professional, to me or to the attorney, what might be going on. So again, we can make that, is I like to say, the rifle shot to the problem, as opposed to just splattering and spending a lot of money that doesn't need to be spent. But, I have had people contact me, and then they go to their attorney, and their attorney's like, yeah, you don't need that. And that's problematic. But that, again, the attorneys that we work with, we typically don't run into that problem.
Got it. At that point, they're probably realizing how over their head with it, yeah, over the head it is. I've seen that happen a lot. So we talked a little bit about preparing for the divorce and kind of in the early stages of the divorce. Now we've hired an attorney, and they've started to think about bringing you into the mix, or they've the client has called you themselves and said, like, we're kind of we're in it now. Stuff starting to kind of surface, and I need your help. What are some of the most common discrepancies that you've found? I mean, I have my opinion on this, but you're the one doing this work. So what are some of the most common financial discrepancies that you find in your investigations?
Yeah, typically it's going to be hidden accounts. That is probably, I wouldn't say, I guess from the investigation standpoint, that's the thing that we run into a lot, are accounts, hidden assets, unknown accounts. Or there is the, underreporting of income, or the economic downturn that I mentioned before, especially where there is one or more privately held businesses in the marriage, and typically one spouse has no access, doesn't really know what's going on in the business. Then we start seeing monkey business going on in that business. Whether it's, one example is a spouse who had multiple privately held businesses, but was also had some businesses with their family. And the spouse was moving underperforming clients to his personal business that was under the umbrella of the marriage, and moving the lucrative clients to the other businesses, so that hiding the income and that type of thing. So yeah, it's all over the board, but hidden assets, underreported income, things of that nature.
How do you typically find that the work that you do impacts the outcome of the proceedings?
What? I'm sorry?
How do you, based on the work that you do, like what have you seen, and what is the impact to the proceedings? I presume that once you come in and you've been able to make a case for these hidden accounts and show the courts like what all the findings that you have, I presume that positively impacts the client experience. So like, what do you usually see? Is it an increase in alimony? Is it an increase in asset? Like what's been your experience?
Yeah. So, all across the board, a lot of times we see things settle very quickly for the good, simply because, then that makes you ask, well, wait a minute, why they want to settle so quickly? Because there's something else we don't know about. But yeah, but typically it brings an opportunity to increased alimony, increased child support, division of assets, that sort of thing. But yes, typically from a positive perspective. Nice.
Yeah. I'm going to ask another selfish question. This conversation is apparently all about me today. I'm interested in understanding some of the technology that's involved, because this can't necessarily just be done with spreadsheets, right? Because you might deal with, you have one account that could take you down a rabbit hole that turns into, you found 30 other accounts like you mentioned earlier. What kind of technology are you using? Are you using AI? How is that? What's this all look like?
Yeah. So the primary technology, and to answer the question, yes, it is a lot of it. A lot of it is spreadsheets,
Okay.
but we use technology that allows us. Back in the day when I first started, it was all hand keying. So it was a lot of work. And then there again, very expensive, to build a whole database of financial transactions and accounts connected to each other and all of that sort of thing. But now we use software that allows us, that will take some of even the worst copy of a copy of a copy of a bank statement that we feed into the software, and it will bring us back a very nice, clean spreadsheet of transactions. So that helps to really alleviate the time that gets put into the manual labor of it. We still have to use our own brains for the actual analysis. And as far as AI goes, the difficulty for us still is confidentiality. So it's all so new right now. And someone will tell you, oh yeah, this is perfectly confidential and security is great. And then in the next breath, it's like, well, no, hold on. Your client's bank statements are out there and in the cloud, and, security issues, really. I do foresee over time AI being very helpful in this sort of situation. But for us, the kind of work that we do, not yet.
I was going to ask about some of the ethical considerations that you have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. For us, it's primarily confidentiality for sure. But
You mean you don't want to send somebody's bank statements out to ChatGPT?
There's only so much you can redact and get away with it. So yeah. But not right now, not ChatGPT for sure.
No.
We use it for other reasons, but not for financial analysis.
100%. I'm a big fan of ChatGPT. We use ChatGPT for a lot of things, but sending bank statements to the wherever it goes, which is above my pay grade for sure. From a technology perspective, we certainly don't trust it at this stage of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
This, I would say, this is kind of what we call the carte blanche segment of our conversation. So, is there anything that I didn't ask of you that I should have asked, or anything you want to share with our listeners that would be important for them to know?
Well, I don't know that it's anything that you didn't ask, but I would say this is that just from an awareness perspective, financial fraud really thrives in silence. Bring that silence out into the open. And we talked about that a little bit. And then the other thing is that, for your listeners, is that they're not powerless in this process. I mean, the more that they know, the stronger that they're going to stand. So like I said, make it your business to know your finances and or the accounts that are out there and available.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, we deal with that financial fraud, financial abuse all the time. And it's sad to see, but the more work we do in this space and the more we see it, it's so many people have that experience, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is too, I think, is that you don't have to be a millionaire to have this be a problem. It can be the smallest amount of income. It just doesn't matter. Just make it your business.
Yeah. We just wrapped up a case that was $18 million in assets with a couple jets and multiple homes and all kinds of stuff involved. And the reality is that we saw the same things in that case that we saw in the case where I have a gal who's living in a shelter trying to, rebuild her life. And we're trying to help her through the divorce side of things. And there's not a lot of assets involved, but she really needs the help and the support, and so many parallels in those cases. And you're talking about, $250,000 in assets versus almost 20 million.
Yeah. Insane.
Yeah, it really is. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights with us and all of your experiences with us today. For our listeners who want to learn more about forensic accounting or need expert assistance in their financial disputes, you can find more information about Kelly's work by visiting forensicstrategic.com. If you're navigating through complex financial challenges in a divorce, remember that Allegiant Divorce Solutions is here to support you all along the way. Visit allegiantds.com for expert advice and available resources. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more enlightening discussions. And until next time, stay informed and proactive. Keyword there, be proactive in managing your financial affairs. Until next time.